Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about the Duranoid Company in Newark, New Jersey. Now, I have talked about Duranoid years ago. I talked about the factory and things about it, but I want to mention some other stuff about the Duranoid Company, which is so important. I am amazed by what survives in our history and how much is lost. The building that was Duranoid still exists. And I have some things I want to mention about it in just a few minutes. But first I want to tell you, for those who are not aware, the Duranoid Company is the company that basically created the composition for the 78 record. This is important stuff. When Emil Berliner started his disc company, he was using hard rubber and things like that for his discs, and it was very, very unsuccessful because it would flatten out in spots. And he started having his records pressed by Duranoid. And working with them, they wanted to come up with a composition for his disc records. And they developed one that was very, very successful. And that became the composition for the 78 record. And to be perfectly honest, over the years, there were a few changes here and there. But the basic composition stayed pretty much the same. And that was developed at Duranoid. Now this is important because basically the development of the 78 record owes much of its development to the composition of the record itself. And that was developed at Duranoid. Right on Chestnut Street in Newark, New Jersey. The building is still there. I went with Don Wilson, who's a collector and who also makes copies of recording. We went to go see the place and met the owner and talked to him. And of course he wasn't aware of its history. But I told him that I'll try to come back and maybe bring him a recording that has the markings of Duranoid. See, every record that was made by Duranoid, except for the Berliners, there's a difference there, they used a stamp that was put onto the dead wax with a D to tell you it was a Duranoid pressing. And the interesting thing is that the Duranoid Company made Zonophone records. They made Victor records. They made off-brand records like the Oxford records for Sears, which were from several different stampers. But they made them. Also the specialty recordings for Victor, like the Patty records, the Melba records, and the Tomano recordings have the D of Duranoid on them. And I want to let you see what that looks like. I want to give you a few examples. Reaching down here, this is what you look for. And I don't know if you can see it, but you will see the D of Duranoid on the record. That's from an Oxford. Let's take a look over here. This is a Caruso recording. And above the matrix number, you'll see the D. And of course the D is for Duranoid. There was some speculation years ago that meant, I think it was a Dennington recording machine, but that wasn't used until about 1906 or so. But you'll find recordings made in 1902 with the D on them. And that is because that's all the Duranoid Company. Now, as I mentioned before, the Duranoid Company was there for a number of years, made records for Victor, made records for Zonophone. In fact, Zonophone's offices were right down the street, and Bedford Royal had his offices there working with Duranoid. And it appears that eventually the Duranoid Company was purchased outright by Universal. Might possibly be. I'm not totally sure yet. I'm trying to track down all of that history. Or it might have been purchased by the Victor Talking Machine Company. I'm not totally sure. Because eventually Victor more or less took over Zonophone toward the end of its reign around 1910, 1911, and was pressing the records directly right in Camden. And so Duranoid became less important, so perhaps they just took it over. Very much like Columbia did with the Burt Company. They bought a lot of their stuff at one point and just used their materials and went up to Bridgeport, Connecticut. So, my feeling is this. One thing I want to mention, and that is that the Duranoid Company, the building, exists. The Duranoid's involvement in recording is very important from the time of the Berliner Gramophone, including the beginnings of the European recording industry. It's an amazing thing to realize that those early Berliner discs made in Europe for the fledgling gramophone company in London, the material came from Newark, New Jersey. And that's how the European recording industry started, from material sent from Duranoid. That's how important Duranoid was. And we should remember that, and there should be a historic marker on the building. I'm very much of the belief of that because the industry, the recording industry as we kind of know it in our history, goes back to Duranoid. And it should be remembered. And we should take what we have learned, mark buildings, and share them with future generations. That's important. That's what history is about. And that's what education is about. Thank you.